Hi guys, welcome to my channel. So today's video is one that you guys have been asking for quite a while, and it is a baby blanket. Now this particular blanket is a little bit more oversized, so it is still suitable for a toddler or a bigger kid. My daughter Evelyn has one that is about the same size. They're about a 36 by 36 blanket, and she is 4. She still uses it. If she's cuddled up watching a movie, she'll just have it wrapped around her. And so I have a feeling that this blanket is going to kind of grow with children as well. At least that is the goal. This is one that I knit for my son, hence the name Charlie's Blanket. That is my son's name, and he kind of helped me in the process of making this. So it is definitely inspired by him. I hope you guys like it too though. And this is what it looks like. So this one is made out of a Malabrigo sock yarn in the colorway Fresco y Seco, and I think it's really pretty. It's got these little eyelet rows in it, and I wanted to keep things very nice and orderly and straight because that is definitely the way my son is, at least right now. And I think it turned out really well. Like I said, it is about a 36 by 36 inch blanket, and it's fairly simple as well. So if you are interested in how to make this blanket, then just keep on watching. I would also like to remind you that if you would like to see written instructions instead, I do always link those on my blog, so you can check out the description box and find the written instructions there. But anyway, let's hop into how to make this baby blanket. For this project, I'm going to use 3 hanks of this Malabrigo sock yarn in the colorway Fresco y Seco, and the needles I'm using are going to be a US 6 or 4 millimeter circular needle. I'm going to start out by casting on 220 stitches with a long tail cast on, so I'm going to leave a pretty good tail here, and then I'm going to put a slip knot onto my needle. And for a long tail cast on, what I'm going to do is have the tail of my yarn in my left palm, and I'm going to just kind of gently hold it while I have my working yarn kind of draped over my index finger on my right hand. And I'm going to take my left hand thumb and go underneath that tail yarn, and then my needle is going to go right alongside my thumb through that little loop we created, and then I'm going to take my working yarn, wrap it around my needle, and then that loop on my thumb I'm going to drop right over the top of the needle. So once again, I'm going to take my thumb underneath, I'm going to bring my needle right alongside, wrap my working yarn around, and drop that loop over the top of the needle. And I'm going to continue doing this until I have 220 stitches on this needle here. You can see right now I have got 4. So I'm just going to keep going until I have 220 stitches. Once I have 220 stitches on my needles, I'm going to work 6 rows of stockinette stitch. So I'm going to knit the first row all the way across. Then on the wrong side of the fabric, I'm going to purl all of these stitches, and that's going to create that stockinette texture that we're looking for. And I'm going to work 6 rows of this, so knit 1 row, purl the next, and then I'll show you what that stockinette texture starts to look like. I've now knit 6 rows of stockinette stitch, so this is the right side of the fabric. You can see all those little V's that look all cute, and then the other side is reverse stockinette, so you can see all of the little bumps there. And now we are ready to do an eyelet row. So I'm going to knit 18 stitches here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. And then I'm going to knit the next 2 stitches together as if they were one stitch. So I'm going to take my right hand needle and slip that through both of those next 2 stitches, wrap my working yarn around, and slide them off. So I've worked those 2 stitches together. And to keep our stitch count even, I'm going to do a yarn over. So I'm going to take my working yarn and bring it right through the middle of my 2 needles. And that's all I'm going to do. I'm then going to knit 18 more stitches. And as I do this, you can see that that little yarn over made an extra stitch right there. So I've got my 20 stitches for my repeat pattern here, and I've got 1 stitch on the second repeat. And I'm going to repeat that little pattern we just did 10 times. So I've got 1 stitch here, there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I'm going to knit the next 2 stitches together, yarn over, and repeat until there are 20 stitches remaining. So I'm just doing my 10th eyelet, so now I can knit to the end, and there are going to be 20 stitches at the end of my row here. And then once we knit all of these, we have 1 more row in our whole eyelet pattern. And we're going to repeat those 8 rows until our blanket measures about 36 inches, or until the blanket is a square. So now that we've got our 7th eyelet row done, or row 7 of our eyelet pattern, we're going to go ahead and work 1 purl row. And when we get to the eyelet stitches, or the yarn overs, we're just going to knit them like a normal purl stitch. And I'll show you what I mean when I get there, because it does look a little funny when you're starting out, but it's pretty simple. So we're just going to purl to that first yarn over. Then when we get there, you can see that that yarn over looks a little bit different than other stitches, but we're going to treat it the exact same way that we normally would. So I'm going to just put my right hand needle right through that yarn over, bring my working yarn around, and work a purl into that stitch. And we're going to just work that entire row until we reach the end, and we're going to repeat those first 8 rows of our pattern until the blanket measures about 36 inches or is a square. And you can kind of see that yarn over does make a nice little eyelet, and it's just going to look better the more we do. So we're going to keep on working. So just as a refresher, we're going to knit 6 rows of straight stockinette stitch. Row 7 is another eyelet row, so I'm going to knit 18 stitches. There's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. Knit the next 2 together as 1 stitch in a K2 together, yarn over, and repeat a total of 10 times, and then knit to the end. Row 8 is a purl row, so we're going to purl across, and we're going to repeat those 8 rows until our blanket measures about 36 inches or has a square shape. I just finished with row 8 of my repeats, and my blanket does measure about 36 inches now, and it's going to be hard to see at this angle, but just trust me that it is 36 inches about. And now what I'm going to do is knit 5 more rows of stockinette stitch, starting with a right side row, and I'm also going to be ending with a right side row. So I'm going to go ahead and knit 5 more rows. I just finished my 5th row of stockinette right on the end there, and now things are going to get pretty crowded on my needles as we work on the border. And the first thing that I'm going to do is slip a stitch marker right on my right hand needle there. So these are all the stitches that I just completed. And then I'm going to kind of pull my needle out so that I have a little bit of wiggle room, and I'm going to pick up 1 stitch here. So I'm going to go right into the side of my work and put my needle right in there, wrap my working yarn around, and pull up a stitch. And I'm going to add another stitch marker. This one is going to be a little bit different than that first one. I have these little star stitch markers. And now as I go along this first edge here, I'm going to pick up about 3 stitches for every 4 stitches. So I'm going to locate the next stitch here and do the same kind of thing. I'm going to put my needle right into that stitch, wrap my working yarn, and pull through to bring up another stitch. And then I'm going to go into the very next stitch, do the same thing. And one more time, I'm going to find that next stitch. And oh, I think I went into the same stitch there, didn't I? So I'm going to grab the next one. And now I'm going to skip that next stitch and grab the next one. So I'm going to kind of work this way the entire side here. There's 1 and 2 and 3. Skip the next and go in for 1, 2, 3, all the way down the side. I've now picked up all of the stitches along one of the sides, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did for the first corner. I'm going to put a little stitch marker on my needle, pick 1 more stitch up in the corner, and then I'm going to add another stitch marker, if I can pick it up here. There we go. And now I'm on the bottom edge. So this is our cast on edge, and I'm going to pick up 1 stitch in every single stitch across. So I should have 220 by the end. So let me see if I can find my first stitch here. I'm going to pick up 220 stitches along this edge. I just finished picking up all of the stitches on my cast on edge, so I have 1 more side to pick up, and as you can see, the stitches are getting more and more crowded, but thankfully it's just a short border, so it's not that big of a deal, at least not to me. If it is something that bothers you, certainly go ahead and grab a longer cable. But for me, I'm going to see if I can grab my stitch markers. They are stuck to the ground here. I'm going to put 1 of those on my needle, and then I'm going to pull out my needle here just a little bit so that I can really get into those corner stitches and pick up 1. This is where it's going to get confusing for me because this is where my first bit of yarn is. So make sure that I have my working yarn here and pick up 1 stitch right in the corner. And then one more stitch marker. And just like that first side, we're going to pick up 3 out of every 4 stitches. So let me see if I can find my first stitch. There we go. There's 1, 2, and 3. Skip the next stitch. 1, 2, 3. Skip the next, all the way across this side. Okay, so I picked up all of the stitches along my last side here. So I'm going to put one more stitch marker on my work, pick up one more corner stitch, and add one more little stitch marker. And now I'm going to knit across these stitches until I get to that first marker. If you remember, I put that blue one on at the very beginning here. Let's see if we can find it. There it is. So I'm going to knit across until I get to this marker, and this is my beginning of round. We're now working in the round, and we're just going to work a few border rounds. So I'm going to go ahead and knit to the beginning of my round. I've reached my beginning of round marker here, so I'm going to slip that to my other needle and start working on the first round of my border. And this round I'm going to purl all of the stitches, slipping the markers as I come to them. So I'm going to purl that first corner stitch, slip that marker, and purl until the next markers, where I'm going to just go ahead and slip all of those as well. And I'm going to continue like this until I get back to that beginning of round marker. Round 1 of my border is now complete, so I'm going to slip that beginning of round stitch marker. I'm going to knit the next stitch, slip my next marker, and now I'm going to do an increase. So I'm going to do a left leaning increase, and in order to do that, I'm going to take my left hand needle and bring it right underneath that bar that's right between my needles there. And I'm going to knit the back of that stitch. So I'm going to slide my right hand needle right through there, bring my working yarn around, and pull it through. And that creates a left leaning increase. And now I'm going to knit to my next marker. I've now reached my next marker, and before I go ahead and slip that, I'm going to make one increase right leaning. And to do that, I'm going to take my left hand needle here and bring it underneath that same bar, but I'm going back to front this time. And now I'm going to knit the front of it, and I'm going to take my other needle and just gently pull it out a little bit so I can get a little bit more of a loop. And I'm going to knit the front of that loop, and now you can see that I have a right leaning decrease or increase there. So I'm going to slip my next marker, knit that corner stitch, and I'm going to repeat those increases all the way to my beginning of round. So I'm going to slip that next marker, make one left increase, and so I'm going to take my needle front to back on that bar and knit the back of this stitch, knit to the next marker, make one right leaning increase by taking my needle beneath the bar from back to front, and then knitting the front of that stitch, and keep working all the way around till my beginning of round marker. I'm going to knit one more purl round, but as I go along this round, I am going to take off all of these corner markers here so that we don't have to worry about them when we are casting off. So this is just a really small little border, but it does add quite a bit, and it will help that stockinette stitch to kind of not curl in on itself. So we're gonna go ahead and purl all the way around, removing markers as we come to them. Now that I've finished my last border row, all that's left is to cast off. So I'm going to remove that beginning of round marker, and now I'm going to knit the next 2 stitches as I normally would. And to cast off, I'm going to grab that first stitch that we worked and slip it right over the top of the second. So I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to knit the next stitch and slip that one off. And I'm just going to keep working like this all the way around. Once all the stitches are cast off, I'm just going to lift up this loop a bit and cut the tail of my yarn. Pull that tail through the loop that I made. And now all I have to do is weave in some ends and block my little blanket here. And that's all there is to it. So there you go. That is how you make Charlie's blanket. I really love this, and he does too. So I'm really happy with how it turned out. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and if you decide to make this project yourself, please let me know on Instagram. I will leave my Instagram account down below. And while I don't post a whole lot, I always try to check there, and I would love to see your finished projects. So anyway, I think that that is going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!